Hello and welcome to the Holon IQ 2022 Global Impact Summit. I'm Vernon Baxter and I'm the VP for Health at Holon IQ. As part of our Africa Summit, I'm delighted to be joined by Lloyd Marshall, the co-founder and chief executive at Wisepill. Welcome, Lloyd.
Thanks, Vernon. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So, as with some of the other sessions in the Africa Summit, we're really here to learn more about Lloyd's business and Wisepill as an organization. And then we're going to talk a bit more broadly about the African healthcare sector and the direction of travel. And to get us started, Lloyd, I'd really like just you to kind of share a bit about Wisepill's story, why you founded the business, and maybe kind of take us back to the basics of what it is you do.
Great, thanks, Vernon. Yeah, it's a great story and one I do like to share. We have to go back about 15 years. I was running a company for a group in Cape Town, and we were doing communications. And during the course of my work, a local Cape Town doctor approached me, and he had this idea about real-time adherence management. He shared with me the problem that South Africa was facing in terms of TB, tuberculosis. At that stage, I was aware of TB, but I really didn't understand the scale of the problem. And I also didn't realize that it was treatable and that TB was actually curable. And if people just took their medication for their 6-month period, if you had just normal drug-sensitive TB, the odds were that you would be cured. And so there was great hope, but unfortunately the situation in South Africa was really dire, and essentially the TB bug was being incubated in the country, and a lot of the problem there really was non-adherence to medication. So once I understood the challenge and what we could do about it, this sounded like a fantastic idea. And so I facilitated a joint venture with this Dr. David Green. So we started prototyping, and we came up with the very first version of the product, and we're able to test this in government and also some of the medical insurance companies. And we saw great results, and so we were very excited about this. And in fact, when the idea was shared, we had a lot of interest internationally, and so overnight we had many people contacting us, very interested and eager to get involved in what we were doing.
Yeah, and just to again while you continue telling the story of how you founded it and developed it and the product itself, just going back to the basics of medical adherence and maybe give some context on how prevalent it is as an issue where people effectively don't take medication regularly, don't take medication as instructed, and how much visibility did the sector have of this as an issue? Because I would imagine by its very nature, it's very difficult to know when adherence is failing or to measure non-compliance, if that's the right term.
Yeah, exactly. So this has been a problem in all sectors of medication, whether it's a chronic illness that you're trying to manage, or whether this is just something like a course of antibiotics. In the case of TB, it was really a known problem, and at the time, the way it was managed was through something called DOTS, or directly observed therapy. So there was a lot of focus on the problem of adherence, and people tend to, with tuberculosis, for instance, they tend to start their medication well. After a while, they either feel a little bit better, and then they decide to stop taking their medication, or they might start to feel the side effects of the medication, and that might cause them to stop. And then, of course, there's just, normal life challenges, and just people become forgetful and stop taking the medication. And the huge impact that you have there is you get the drug-resistant TB that results, because you've all the strongest bugs survive while you're still in the early stages of taking your medication, and then if you stop taking it, as you pass that bug on to the next person, you get these really strong strains, and so that's the challenge, the particular challenge as far as tuberculosis is concerned. So we were quite optimistic in the early stages. It was before the era of the Internet of Things. So we did have GSM and 2G technologies in the cell phone industry that allowed us to create a solution. But I think one of the real problems was that people didn't really understand how a solution like this could be scalable, and I think people were reluctant to be early adopters, particularly when you look at government. Government tends to not be on the bleeding edge, obviously, and although we did some important trials and it was well accepted, government wanted to sort of hang back, and then also the insurance companies as well, I think, were in the same boat. So so we decided to actually take this technology and go and speak to the research industry, and so we spent time with the Desmond Tutu Foundation in Cape Town. They were our early partners in this. And then we were very fortunate to hook up with sort of leading lights in adherence research technology, and people like David Bangsberg and Jessica Habera from Massachusetts General Hospital that were doing research in Uganda. And so we were able to, through that mechanism, to take the product to the next step, particularly looking at low resource settings, which is a big challenge in Africa and other parts of the developing world. And I think a big breakthrough was when Family Health International selected Wisepill to use for their Truvada trials. And that was carried out by many of the USA universities in the USA, and then also in South Africa and places like Thailand. And so although we didn't get what we were looking for initially in the early phases, we were looking for adoption by governments in their TB programs. What we were able to do is lend credibility to the technology, and also to gain many partners and clients worldwide that were looking specifically at the problem of non-adherence to medication.
And Lloyd, could you take us through how the product works, or obviously it's it essentially controlled dispensation of or dispensing of medicine, and creates records for the patient and the doctor. Is that the essence of it?
100%. So I have a system diagram that I can maybe just walk through the important elements of
Sure.
this.
Let me bring that up.
So those are the important elements. First of all, you have a dispenser. So that could come in any shape or form. It could be a bag, it could be a Corex box that you see in this particular diagram over here. But what happens is the patient would open their medication box as per normal, and in opening it, that would trigger the little electronic module that would then send a signal over the 2G, 3G, nowadays it's LTE, through the cell phone network to the Wisepill central server. And what we like to do is not send reminders to patients every single day, but only send a reminder if the patient doesn't take the medication. So the server keeps track of the patient's medication time and prescription. And then if it notices that a patient has missed their medication after a certain time has lapsed, a reminder will then go out to the patient's cell phone. And then we can also configure the system to send a reminder to a caregiver as well, maybe after an additional period, to say that the patient has missed their medication. So this is what's really important to this in this is the fact that you don't need such heavy infrastructure to manage a large number of patients. So you're really looking at management by exception. So you can have a large number of patients, and by getting reports, a caregiver or a health professional can just target the patients that are non-compliant. So in a group of 1,000 patients, you might have 100 patients that are struggling with adherence, and those are clearly highlighted by the system. And then you might have a smaller number that require either a physical visit or a phone call.
And presumably, like with this sort of data. Sorry, Lloyd.
Yeah, so I think that in a nutshell, that's how the system works. I mean, over time, we've evolved the system so that we can cater with a lot of different technologies and provide custom software where required in certain cases.
And Lloyd, just sort of more generally on the role of telecoms in healthcare in Africa. I mean, it's often cited as a part of the world where the mobile phone is sort of disproportionately important or plays a very important role in healthcare. And obviously, this is a real life example of this. But do you see other instances in the kind of broader Africa healthcare context where that direct to patient or direct to individual communication of healthcare messaging is central to the system?
Yeah, it's. I think it's become a vital tool, and not just in Africa, but India and other places where you have people living in remote communities, and it's just from all aspects, from farming, from agriculture, from keeping tabs on the weather or markets, pricing for their goods. The same thing applies in the medical sphere, and of course that comes with its challenges as well, because in your low resource settings you don't always have perfect cell phone coverage. So we have to design these systems so that they are forgiving. So any records that or any events that get stored on the pill boxes are stored and then forwarded when they're able to be forwarded on. So you don't always need a live connection for the system to work. But we have now started using questionnaires as well. So it's possible also to get more than just the adherence information. You might want to understand why a patient is struggling with their medication. And so it becomes a really powerful tool. We've had a look at the other challenges, such as access to power outages, that sort of thing, and ensure that these pill boxes will have sufficient battery power to last for a full TB course. So we see the devices now not requiring a charge for up to 6 or 7 months. I think the fact that we started off with our research in Uganda and South Africa enabled us to build something really robust that at the end of the day works in the field. And then it's obviously going to work in a first world situation as well, and even more efficiently.
And just obviously in a resource setting, as you describe it, cost must be a huge consideration when you're manufacturing or transporting and disseminating pieces of technology like this. Can you talk a little bit about that cost profile of the device and sort of how
Yes,
you've been able to manage that?
100%. So yeah, cost is a major factor. We just recently, a couple years ago, the one of our products, the EveryMed 1000, was listed on the Global Drug Facility, which is an initiative from the Stop TB campaign. And it was really critical for countries on a large scale. It was really critical that we could come in there with affordable products. And the only real way to do this is through the economies of scale. And so we make sure that when we do take these products to manufacture, that we're producing at least 5,000 units. Because we have a number of different countries that are looking at the products, we are sometimes able to aggregate the orders and to be able to provide the best possible pricing. One of the ways that we address the pricing issue is through reuse. So these are modular pill boxes, and what that means is when a patient finishes using the pill box, they retain the dispenser, and the electronic module can simply be moved from one pill dispenser to the next. So that's a vital way of making this more affordable. And then we've partnered with a global data provider that's been able to give us really great rates. And for GDF, we actually went to a prepaid model, which also addresses another problem that we face, is the logistics around providing the solution. So we were looking for something like your Kindle model, really, where you can buy a device and it will just work for the next 3 years. You don't have to worry about the data or the SIM card. We've also tried to use solid state in the product. So these are eSIM. We don't use SIM cards. So it's all about ease of use, easy logistics. It's prepaid. It's like, because we wanted to list through the GDF, and the GDF is primarily providing medication to government TB programs. You want the assist device to be as easy to distribute as the medication itself. And those are the challenges that we try to address. Of course, at the moment, we're faced with the repercussions of the pandemic, and which has led to severe pressure, but in a number of aspects, from logistics to chip shortages to the real problems in even getting certain components. So it really has meant, and pressure on pricing as well. So the real key is to have long-term forecasts of what's going to be required for the year, up to 2 or 3 years ahead of the time, which enables us to be able to make sure that we can get the economies of scale, that we can get these products to market in the most affordable way possible.
And Lloyd, maybe if we could sort of, I suppose, broaden the conversation about to take in, I suppose, the larger healthcare scene in Africa and the way that the continent is developing in terms of delivery of healthcare services and quality and access. I mean, obviously, you've been active in this market and had a sort of very kind of frontline view of the sector for some years now. How would you characterize its development generally? And maybe if we look to the future, how sort of optimistic or not are you about how technology can play a role in the continent.
Yeah, I think that the great opportunities, very real opportunities that need to be exploited. I think there are a few factors that are maybe preventing the technology from being adopted, and I think one of them is instability in some of the countries. Governments that are slow to implement new technology. I think in some cases we see a leapfrog of technology. So in some cases, we see an advantage in some of the countries where we've skipped some of the, let's say, more burdensome or difficult technologies, and countries that are going straight to LTE, for example, and 4G technologies allow us to implement much quicker and faster. I think the pandemic has set us back to a large extent, particularly in South Africa. But we've also learned a lot, and I think there's been a lot of focus on TB and HIV right now. So these are the two areas that we focused on mostly in the last 10 years or so. And what we do see is renewed focus, new medicines becoming available, shorter dosage times, and a lot more, let's say, determination by the big global health funders to make a difference. And what I would like to see is the private sector stepping up and coming forward with more solutions for Africa. And really, you've got to grow these solutions in the places where they're going to be needed. And I think that's one of the real successes of Wisepill has been the fact that we started working with researchers in the lowest resource settings, where we were able to specifically address problems and grow the solution in place. So it was not a matter of importing a solution from another part of the country and then trying to shoehorn that into a position where it works. So I'm optimistic. I'm very passionate about supporting local industry, particularly in South Africa. We're based in Cape Town. We've got a good group of different complementary technologies, players, that we try and support. And so I think there's real optimism there that we can solve African problems in Africa. And I think that's vital. Just one example, we worked with a group using drones in Madagascar to actually take smart pill boxes to very remote villages. And what they wanted to show was that that could be cost effective. So what they were doing was both collecting sputum samples from these remote villages, flying them back with drones, doing the diagnosis, and then flying the medications back to these villages. And we did a similar study in Asia as well. So we're in the early stages of this kind of work, but I think there's definitely there's huge scope. And another partner of ours, some of the same individuals that were involved in the drone projects, just recently, a couple of years ago, started a company called Hyphe, Hyphe. And they're providing the most amazing cough technology. What they can do is diagnose TB just by recording a cough from the patient. and they can actually they can diagnose a whole range of different conditions, but the accuracy is quite incredible. And they approached us, and we probably going to be looking at doing something with a pill box as well, to facilitate the diagnosis, and also the tracking of the health of the patient over the period of their medication treatment. So these are really very exciting new technologies, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of it is down to remote management. Just the sheer expense of patients coming to clinics. The old traditional way of managing TB, a patient might have to walk for half an hour to get to a clinic so that they can.
And obviously, for something to be directly observed, it has to be resourced, it has to be staffed, there has to be a physical infrastructure.
There's a huge impact. Another exciting project that we've just recently started is an incentive project. This is also in Uganda, where we provide an incentive if the patient takes their medication more than 90%. At the end of the month, they get a payment on their mobile phone. And at the same time, they get a small payment for their travel, for their next appointment at the TB clinic. So those kind of interventions, at the end of the day, you are trying to make people's lives easier, and at the same time, you're trying to reach more people with the same amount of available funding that you have.
Well, Lloyd, that's been a fascinating discussion. I think some of the themes around solutions built in Africa for Africa healthcare, as opposed to importing technology or technology being developed without that kind of local specificity, I think it's really kind of fascinating. And that kind of focus on cost and access to remote geographies, it's really a really interesting insight into some of the innovation that's taken place in Africa healthcare. I just want to finish by thanking you, Lloyd, for giving your time today to share the story of Wisepill, but also to give some insights into the innovation that's taken place in Africa and healthcare. We really greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Vernon. It's a great pleasure and just an opportunity to share, the exciting challenge, exciting opportunities, and just to share the story of Wisepill and the work that we do in a very, very important area.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Thanks, Vernon. Thank you.